So at the moment, quantum delivers nothing. Nobody uses quantum encryption, except in scientific. Security is only as secure as the devices you use. And if your mindset is not thinking security, you'll never think security. Information your children give away over the internet. Think about the worst, and then think about reality. Sawadee welcome. I'm very pleased to be here today as a guest of Kun Kiatasak, to share with you an information session on unlocking business insights into classical and quantum encryption. To do what we're trying to do today, we need to recognize where each of these products are in their life cycle. Classical encryption has been around for a long time. In fact, if we go back, it's been around since the early 1800s, and it's matured and grown since then. And for those who can recall, and I'm sure all of you do, during the Second World War there was an area called Morse code, which predominantly was used on submarines, but it was dots and dashes. The first cryptographic machine was developed by the Germans in World War II. If we want to really show how old sending messages in secret actually is, go back to the Indians in the US, North America, who were sending smoke signals. That actually was a form of encryption to provide information to other tribes of what was going on. So now where are we? Classical encryption has advanced dramatically over the last 40 years and been constantly revised in terms of the safety that it provides for organizations, which include banks. In terms of the banking industry, there's a network called the SWIFT network. SWIFT is the international transfer of funds worldwide, which most banks today belong to. There's a side story on this, which Russia and China have developed their own to get out of the SWIFT network so they don't have to transfer US dollars, but it's a separate story. But SWIFT allows you to send money from Bangkok anywhere in the world through your bank, and it is secure. The technology used to secure the SWIFT network was designed and developed by the company I used to be CEO of, Senetas. And that encryptor runs anything up to 10 gigabits per second. And the benefits are that it's 100% secure. It's gone through many, many standards. So while we're talking standards, the reason you need these standards is what's called the public key infrastructure. So in the public key infrastructure, the existing systems, when quantum is at its point, which I see as some level in the future, more than a decade, okay? Maybe in my lifetime, maybe. It will be in a position to be able to crack the existing classical encryption. So to avoid that, NIST, which is the US National International Standards for this, have developed what's called a new PKI, a public key infrastructure. This PKI in its own right now will take advantage of new technologies to allow it to secure itself against a brute attack, because that's how they're called, from a quantum computer. Now, as a prelude to what I've just shared with you, every chip in the world needs to have its own PKI updated. For those who are unfamiliar with what PKI is, and those who are, as a reiteration, PKI is a set of roles, policies, hardware that allow things to communicate. So I don't think we'll see it, as I said early on, in the next decade, next 10 years. But I use a term, narrow your focus, dominate your market. We had a partner in Switzerland who worked with us, who are named ID Quantique, and they were doing quantum development based on quantum mechanics and put together a quantum encryptor, very restricted because it could only work over a very short distance at the time. And I think today it might be 380 kilometers, but So you can certainly see there is a limitation on quantum cryptography. But they built it, and then between their company and our company, Senetas, we built a hybrid system, which is actually installed in Switzerland and looks after all their voting during all their elections. But it's running through a small geography, so that's all fine. But it takes quantum and moves it back to classical, back to quantum, and it's fully secure. Let's talk about classical cryptography. I'm not going to read off the side because I think you can do that yourself, but I'm going to share my experience. During my time in the military service, and I was there for a while, we used to have a shackle book. Now, what's a shackle book? When I was away on operations and I had to report back to my central command, I had a shackle book which was valid in those days for a month. And so A, B, C, D right through to Z, and then they put different codes in for every single day of those 28 days in that month. So when I called in and gave my reports, which we call SITREPs, situation reports, and for those who've been in the military, those terms are global, I would go shackles on, and that would mean I would be saying whatever is in code, and then when I end it, I would say shackles off. Now that simple example is exactly the way classical cryptography actually works, because when it goes through its chipset, it does have a version of shackles on and shackles off. Okay. I think important to understand that why do we use encryption? And predominantly, other than for security for our financial systems, it's for our adversaries. So I shared you the five countries who are part of the 5 I's, EYES. You can look that up if you choose. But there's lots of, in my time working with the Indians, Australia started sharing intelligence with the Indians. As a byproduct, intelligence is not intelligence until you've heard it 3 times. So the military will tell you, your first time you hear whatever you hear, it's called information. You need to hear it 3 times, and on the 3rd occasion, it then becomes intelligence. And that's what you act on. You never act just on information. The Israelis spent a lot of time developing their own algorithms. So let's talk about quantum cryptography. Quantum cryptography is still considered in its early development phase. I shared earlier the example of the company ID Quantique and Senetas, who built what's called a hybrid system. In fact, in reality, that hybrid system was installed here in Thailand at one time. Okay? But after the development of quantum security in its advancements, it will make other securities obsolete. I'm repeating some of this because this is really important, because we will need to renew the existing cryptography or cryptographic systems we have, both software and hardware. Okay? Now today, software encryption is pervasive. And what I mean by pervasive, you can be sitting at your desk today and there are security companies, Symantec and many others, okay, Checkpoint, who provide a level of security that you can use. They're very, very capable and very, very good for what they do. They are approved at the highest level that they can be under today's standards. Hardware encryption goes a step further. And I'll share that because in my lifetime we were securing, not that you want to hear this, the satellites over Thailand, the radars over Saudi Arabia, the Jordanian Air Force's rockets that they were sending up. So many, today it's not public knowledge, today it is more public knowledge, so I can't say it. But if you can think of anything that your government would want to keep secure, we started off with banking records, but military is so important. And today I think it's important to understand that military, because of the new advancements in warfare, drones, etc. During Iraq War II, real example, the Americans were flying in Iraq War II, they were being tracked because the chipset they had bought in the US through a subcontractor had what's called dual paths. So the pilot's in the plane, now he's flying, now he talks to his commanding officer, and said, I'm heading to northwest, blah, 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 blah. And the enemy down below understood every single word he said. Every word. And when they did track it back, they found it came from a small organization in Arizona who was selling them chipsets. Where those chipsets came from, I'm not at liberty to tell you today. But I will tell you that the US government, US Defense Force got into trouble because they were looking for the cheapest product. Now, there are multiple movies that have been made in the last 20 years that I will share with you examples where this makes equal sense to you. There was a movie, the name of the movie escapes me, but the guys needed to have their photocopier repaired. Remember, a photocopier today is part of a network. A network is no longer controlled, it's broad. So when the engineer came into service, it was a false call, to service the photocopier, they placed a dual chipset inside the photocopier. This is real because this really does work. The movie showed it, but it's fact. Every time someone came there to photocopy a piece of paper and it photocopied, okay, you can see how old this is because you do it from your screen these days, a copy of that went on another part somewhere else. Okay? And so what was happening, the information that was being used on that photocopier, because it was so sensitive, was being shared with the enemy. And no one knew about it until much, much later. Now, these are the simplicity rules that organizations need to take care of, because anything that makes up part of the network is vulnerable. So is your network secure? You can't say yes it is, because now we're going up to the cloud. Okay? Is it really secure in the cloud? And there are ways to secure it, but you need to ask yourself the question. Now, what's that got to do with classical versus quantum? Because when quantum is able to do the things they are forecasting it'll be able to do, it will crack that completely. It'll be wide open. Hence, I'm repeating again, public key infrastructure is critical in changing policies, chipsets, and everything else. So all existing cryptographic products need to be upgraded. And if you have cryptography running in your organization, irrespective of what it is, you need to talk to your supplier to ask them if they are updating their product to the latest PKI. Okay, and now let's compare classical versus quantum. But before I go ahead on this, I just want to share with you AS, which is standards, 128 is feasible for a quantum break. 256 is quantum resistance. I think, remember, one can be broken, one can resist. But now the QKD, which is a quantum key distributor, is restricted to 8 kilometers as of 2023. And it's still in the labs. So I'm coming back to repeat to you. If we go back to what the name of our presentation is today, classical versus quantum. Quantum in many cases is the future. It's still in the labs. It's not commercial, but it's going to come really, really fast. If you think of how technology have changed. So let's look at the foundations of secure communications, which effectively is where classical comes from. Okay? Leveraging quantum mechanics is what allows us to move at the speed at which we are moving. And the standards around there, which I've shared with you, there's a PKI standard, but they come through both AES, which is the standards chip, okay, and also RSA. And then on the other chipset side, you have QKD. The future. AES and RSA will be absorbed in some form, and a quantum chip will replace them completely. Future. Okay. I think the idea behind it is to maintain the level of security we currently have, because without it, we make our world more vulnerable. And if you think of the challenges we have globally today, it doesn't matter where we are in the world. I know information because we were working with the National Intelligence Agency here in Thailand while I was doing work here. I can tell you things that are happening in Thailand that I'm not going to repeat to you, okay? But your Thai army is pretty active, okay? And I know the borders they're working on, and they secure everything. Right. let's look at the transition from classical to quantum. And I touched on what countries, or which countries, and how much they're spending in this area. So for your information, as of the preparation of this presentation, China now invests about 15.9 billion US dollars, okay, in quantum. So everyone else pales into significance. So if I take 15.9 and I'm sitting here in Bangkok and I take it with the rate 22 or 23, okay, it can be as high as 25, but you take 16 multiplied by 23, it's 48, 32, it's 38, it's probably 4 trillion baht, okay, a lot of money, okay, a lot of money. But it's followed by the US, which is only 1.9 billion US, where China's already at 15.9. So the US spends less than 14 billion on quantum. I think there's a reason behind this, and I'll give you my reason when I've given you the other countries. Okay? Japan's at 1.8. So just behind the US, but a long way behind China. Okay? And the EU doesn't seem to care. Okay? Why do I think these numbers are they are? What I've told you earlier on, don't read the slides because I'll talk to you around it. On this case, I'm encouraging you, read the slides, okay? And the reason specifically is, and there are key words in there, that when we get to post-quantum cryptography, it will be able to run on classical computers. I'm just going to hesitate for 2 seconds. Think about all your existing computers today in that time frame that'll be able to take all this quantum technology and run it on the same boxes. It transforms the world, okay? But it's in the labs. We're not there yet. Let's take a closer look at what I've just spoken about. In theory, quantum would not be able to sync with classical chips or photons. But quantum has to be a hybrid system today, okay? Because without classical cryptography, it's very futuristic. So I come back and I know I'm repeating some of the things I'm saying, is because some of this stuff is, and I say because I think of me, is quite simple, but it's not. It's very, very complex in terms of understanding. So at the moment, quantum delivers nothing. Okay? You heard us just talking about. This is promises. Okay? It's happening. Money's being spent, but it delivers nothing unless it's a combination of classical and quantum. There is nothing, and that's not a future because it's got distance restrictions. Classical's only 20% of an organization worldwide. I just want to look at some myths of quantum, okay? Because this stuff's being, I use the word fed to us through magazines, through all forms of media. There are people who have a purpose to want to promote certain parts of it, but you need to be able to get through the maze to get to the real facts, okay? So let me give you some hype, okay? Quantum computers will not replace traditional systems as they don't process transactions or run Word, Excel, or website. Quantum just simulate complex scenarios and solve complex computations. So come back again. Very powerful for running code through and checking it. But the simple examples that we've shared about setting Excel spreadsheets, I said to you, between different areas, you can't use quantum for that because it doesn't work that way. It's designed, if I say it's designed, it's the heavyweight. So if we think of Muay Thai, okay, this is a heavyweight boxer versus a lightweight boxer, okay? In some cases, a lightweight boxer probably beats him. But in this case, I'm saying this heavyweight is so big and heavy, he can blast the small guy, okay? Brute force, okay? That's where it is today. It's not about to take over. I want to come back to the company that I've managed, Senetas, ID Quantique, and I need to give them credit because they were our partners when we put this development together. Their engineers came with our engineers. We took our classical encryption, they took their best of quantum, and we brought it together and developed a hybrid system. Doesn't use pure quantum, even though market as quantum cryptography, because that without the hybrid system which comes from Senetas, it wouldn't work. Okay, less than 20% of organisations have sufficient security systems. I will give you a real life story. I was in the Philippines, and I met the 2IC, the Chief of Defence Force. And when I went into his office, his secretary was there on Facebook. Now I have a military background, and the shackles went up on my neck. Here we're in a military base. I'm with the 2IC of the Philippines military, and his secretary's there on Facebook. So we go and we talk to him. And we talked to him about security, and he said, we're very secure. Everything's there. And I said, do you have a secretary who's using Facebook outside? He said, no, Facebook's safe. I said, really? You know, Facebook is public, is part of the public. It's not this closed network you have in the military. And we spoke about some stuff. And then he challenged me. He said to me, how good are your people in Australia? And I said, well, we call them I will call them ethical hackers, because we don't do this to advance our process. But we could crack into your systems. And he said, can you? And I said, yes. I said, but I need a letter from you giving me approval to take to my government, for my government to give me approval for my engineers, the ethical hackers, to go into your system. And then we will send you, effectively by today's standards, photoshots of what you have. It'll all be secure. And you can see how weak your system is. Because from your office you communicate to another office. You have a microwave. We can secure the microwave. Because in Australia we secure all the microwave communications between the police. When the police are talking on radios on cars, it goes through microwave. We secure the whole thing, totally encrypted. Anyway, the challenge was put out there. I was in Thailand here for a couple of presentations to the Navy and to other military organisations. And I will say at that time, they were more secure than the Philippines. Okay? You know, I went back to Australia with my letter. I gave it to my government, so I give it to my version of MR5, MR6 in Australia. They approve it. It comes back in. It's all done under controlled conditions. So I have the government there in our office with our engineers, because none of this can be done. It can't be seen as, otherwise it's a foreign nation invading a foreign nation. So this is very, very, very sensitive to do. So the Philippine Defence Force agreed to it. Our government agreed we could do it. Australian government, Defence Force people sat with our people, and we went into the Philippine system. No stories. It was done in 5 seconds. We took all the stuff. I took copies of it. Okay, we never sent it over the internet. Too risky. And I flew back to Manila, and I gave it to him, hard copy. And he looked at me and he said, wow. No, he didn't say that. He was shocked at the ease at which, and I said to him, this is the time, because it comes with a time clock. It doesn't show you what strokes the engineer used, okay, because that's secret, okay? And he said, was it this quick? I said, that quick. From there forward, he called his secretary and he said, no more Facebook, okay? You stay on military networks, because you have two sets of networks in the military. You have the military network and you have the civilian network, and the two don't talk to each other. So when the civilian network's talking, it's at risk, okay? Because you can come through switches and routers and all sorts of things. And then you have the military network, which is hard. I use the word hard. It's hardened because it has all the security devices within it. So I use that as another example to you. I would say to you today, if you ask the organizations with whom you're doing business with, are you safe and secure? 99.99% will say yes. And you believe them, wouldn't you? And you shouldn't. Example, will not name the bank, but it's happened globally. We had a bank in Australia, that they hacked into the telephone network, the switchboard, and were taking credit card information. And the bank was not going to go to the public and say, we have been hacked into, we've just lost $200 million. They'll never do that because their business goes down. So what they did is that they paid off all the customers who had been hacked into, and they played the spammers, because it's happening. People spam you. They're doing it now even more than they were 15, 20 years ago. They hack in and they say, I've taken all your medical records, and unless you pay me X amount of money, I'm going to release them into the ether. And people are paying because they don't want to be seen as not being safe. So this is another reason. The question is, how safe is safe? And my experience, okay, and you can beat me over the head when I'm wrong, is that the people who secure these networks inside the organization are part of the problem. They don't go hacking. They're not. But this gives them power, that they're controlling all this stuff, okay? And that they tell you they're secure. But I can tell you switches, routers, they're part of every network. Go through each of the devices that you have inside your network and find out how safe they really are. Every organization needs to protect itself. Some this much and some this much. But you all need a level of security. And we all have bank accounts. Now, I was living in Bangkok at the time that year 2K was reaching its penultimate, meaning right at the top. So I started living in Thailand in about 97 and through to 2000. So when Moses was a boy, okay, as I sometimes say. Year 2K was a time in the computer industry which forced hundreds and thousands of companies to upgrade their software. And that's because they were told that when the clock ticked over on the computer program, it had 1999 and it became 2000, the programs wouldn't run anymore because they hadn't been designed beyond that. And companies were selling people new software or doing modifications to the existing software they have. There will be a Y2Q. There will be a Y2 quantum. Same as we had for year 2K for software for computer systems. But I go back to where we spoke about. It means that the security software that you run in your existing organizations, the suppliers of that need to make sure they have the latest PKI. So you have a responsibility to go down and write all the pieces of devices and software you have on your network and go to the different suppliers and say, are you latest PKI? Are you latest PKI? Write to them and say, when will you be? Why won't you be? Because you're going to find that, as happens in all networks, this is the example. Half the people go ahead and do it, the other half are deciding in train to get through it, and a quarter of it not doing any of it. You'll have compatibility issues. I'm saying to you that at that time, year 2K was seen as the biggest computer scam in the world. And I did a sale with my team when I was in Australia to one of the major banks for a $350 million upgrade to secure them from year 2K. And then at SAP we sold more software in 98, 99 and 2000, okay? Because as soon as someone said the software's got a problem, it's not working, you need a new piece of code, okay? Pull that one in, put the new one in. And the software companies made a fortune. Now, some of it was necessary because the code was really, really old. So let's look at the evolution of quantum computing. As I say, the benefit that you have for me being here is that I'm old. So I was here when computers first started, okay? And I bet many of you here weren't, okay? So I saw mainframes and I saw the evolution of what we were trying to do to where we are today on mobile devices. And fundamentally, it's been very quick. But effectively, from the mainframe that we first had, when it was the IBM 360 or 370, whatever you wish to call it, to where we could get to the first real mobile device, was about 55 years. And I'm suggesting to you that the speed at which quantum will develop is no different. Okay? The capacity to develop new software and to do the things that it can do are happening really, really fast. But now you have to take the device that's huge, okay? And the guys who used to run computer rooms in those days used to wear white coats, like lab officials, like people in laboratories, okay? And then they evolved, and then computers became air-cooled, and then you didn't have to have computer rooms and all the rest of the stuff. To take quantum from there onto a smaller device, although I will, and this is not a contradiction, one of the big telephone companies or mobile manufacturers has suggested, and I have one of their mobiles, but I won't name the company, okay, is suggesting that they can actually put quantum on their new devices. But no one has asked them, what does it actually do? Now, maybe it's used as a search algorithm or something else, but nothing specific. But it's a buzzword. So I will buy this latest phone because it's got quantum in it. What benefits does it do to me? At this stage, we do not know. But I'm suggesting to you that this is still hype, okay? It's still in the laboratories. It's still being developed by governments. We've told you what the Chinese and all the other countries are doing. And it will take some time. It will happen. It will happen. But we are some years away. So you can read what's on the screen, and I'm not going to preclude you from doing that, but I want to share with you some additional stuff. I spoke to you in the earlier slide about the telephone company, mobile company that's actually making this. But I've shared with you the story about photocopying with dual chips. Now, if you have a fax machine, a photocopy machine, any device that sits on your network, anything that you have can have dual path chips. So I'm going to give you a story that I got, which comes from an Israeli company that was trying to do business with us in Australia. We had very advanced technology, and we, at the time when I left and even to today, we ran outside the 5 hours, we were right through the Middle East, okay? Very secure. The Saudi Arabians ran it in their Air Force, Navy, right the way through, radars everywhere. But the point I want to make is that when they looked at the things that they were trying to protect, it's all military and government secrets. And photocopying today is the title I'll put to this, but then just say internet devices. Anything that has a chipset, anything, and that's 100% of what you have on the internet, you can put a dual path chip in. There are companies today that develop dual path chips. So, the Israeli company, who I met in Australia during my tenure, came to see us because we were restricted from selling our stuff to certain countries. And this has got nothing to do with October 7th. I'll put my hand in the air and say I'm a big IDF supporter, but we were restricted because of our global agreements with the US, UK, etc., from selling to some countries, including China. I can tell you a Chinese story about Huawei as well, I can tell you. But where you can get chipsets are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, you can create dual paths in anything. The technology is so advanced. My little nail, I used to tell customers, chipsets will be as small as my nail. What a joke. They're even smaller than that now, okay? They are much more tiny than that, okay? And I've been actively working at Senetas since 2012. So in 12 years, the chipset just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and far more powerful, okay? 32, 64, 128, 256, it just keeps going up and up. Look at your phone. How many gigabytes do you have on your phone? And before it used to be much, much less. So the point I make is that there is a huge and growing influx of funding to pour into quantum, but it's not based on rational thinking and reasonable expectations. Go back to the point I make, I recap, the governments predominantly spending money on this, and some at a much higher rate than others because they're trying to populate the internet. The example I shared with you about, I told you what happened when the Israelis came to Australia. They showed us a piece of software in 2009. Think of the mobile phone in 2009, if you're old enough to remember what a mobile phone looked like in 2009. And they were smart enough then to put a chipset inside the phone. And the way it worked, okay, my chairman refused for us to go on and resell this. So the answer is we never ever sold it. But when that chips went into that phone, it was unseen. No one knew it was there. But now I will send you a text message. That's how you initiate it. And I'll send you a text message and say, hi, how are you? Hope the family's well. And you'll say, who's this? In your language. And you'll say, who is this? You've done too much. Now every phone call you make, every text you receive, every message you get on your phone has got dual paths. It comes straight to me automatically. And they were using that for government secrets. Because you can go back and track government officials who are playing both sides of the fence. Okay? Espionage. Now, they demonstrated that to us, wanting us to resell it, and they wanted to resell our encryption back in Israel. The second part is we couldn't do, and the first part is my chairman, we're a public company, my chairman said no, and the Department of Defence in Australia looked at us and said, and who's going to, the only people who will buy this from you are people in the drug traffic and all other areas, okay? So it's seen as a negative. But in 2009, that was already available on the market, and you could buy it over the internet in South America for $1,500 US for the special chip, which in 2009 sounded like a lot of money. But by today's standards for what you pay for a mobile phone, it's pretty cheap, okay? Now I'm sure they've advanced that technology well beyond that as well. That's 2009. And they didn't take one day to develop that. They took some time and then it was released. Another piece of technology the Australian government would not take because they felt that it would preclude them because they'd have to get approval from the US government. So all I'm sharing with you now, nobody uses quantum encryption except in scientific and our universities and R&D. And it's used for running computations. It is very fast, okay? Because it's far too early and there's no threat. And today, if you went and could buy a quantum computer, it's too pricey. You need to get the price point down so it becomes more commercial. And those who know quantum and think they understand it, and those who don't know quantum don't care. It's true. You know quantum, you really care about the subject matter. I understand a small amount. I have a small interest, but I don't know what quantum is. Who cares? Doesn't affect me on a day-to-day basis, but it's coming. I told you early on when we started the presentation. Let's have a look at where we are. Security world, it's not there yet. It's moving, but it's not there yet. When you go and buy a TV, a laptop, mobile, or even a printer, there's no encryption. In fact, the reality is all our TVs we have today, remember the magic word in front of it? Smart. S-M-A-R-T. I can tell you your TV's watching you if the manufacturer chooses to want a television to do it. You can visibly, through chipsets, watch people in every household in the world, if you wanted to. It's a cost of distributing the chips. So your TV is another screen, okay? It's another device. How many things can't you run on your TV that you can run on a laptop? You can do a lot of things, okay? And you can do internet searches, and you can do everything else. So has it replaced the laptop? Obviously not. But it's a device that I can tell you has no security built in yet, okay? And what we will need to have at some future date, you'll need to have a security dong, let's call it that, a chip that sits inside there that allows you to secure yourself from the rest of the network. You've seen movies where you've seen all the TVs all of a sudden come with the same picture. It's doable, just costs a lot of money to do today. So everything I'm sharing with you about quantum versus classical's there today and can be distributed. The problem is not enough people use classical. They all think they're safe, okay? The people who should be using classical are, but they're still not 100% safe, okay? Quantum will change that completely because it will make it more pervasive. It will have very inexpensive chipsets, and the chip manufacturers are working, whether it be Intel or the Taiwanese manufacturer, they're working hand over fist to build all this new transistors back into the systems. So no one in my lifetime, when I worked in the security industry, and I do talk to people on occasions now, no one really takes it seriously because we trust. We really trust everyone. Now, maybe because I'm an old soldier, and soldier for me stands as save our lives, death is ever ready. So you can be dead in 2 seconds, okay? I don't trust anyone. So I don't care. Last week they were your enemy and this week they're your friend. Not so sure. But unless you're working in government levels at the most senior levels, us humans on the ground, we trust anyone. We are far more trusting than we've ever been in our entire lives. So we give over, just think of what information you give out on online, on WhatsApp, on WeChat, your whole life's there. When I lived in Singapore, so maybe 7, 8 years ago, it came from the US, and they had technologies and it built a computer that they had these screens around every city in the world, in the US, and they could watch you. Wherever you went, whatever you did. Well, they can do that. Our company used to secure the airports in Australia. I think they obviously still do. Because what they do when criminals come through airports worldwide, they hack into networks because the officials, the police, the Secret Service are all watching you, whether you like it or not, okay? And what they were doing, they were hacking into networks and putting my face on your head, okay? And then I watch you and I see you dressed, then there's a different face. So we secured all the networks so they couldn't hack into it, because that's happening. These aren't war stories, this is factual stuff that happens every single day. And I go back to the point I started on this, we are very unaware that it's happening, but we just feel that the world's a much safer place. And the world's not safer. It's more unsafe today than it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago, because technology has allowed it to advance. I want to close off by saying, in the world today, I won't give you the top 10, I'll just give you the top 1 to 6. But I will tell you, Thailand is number 6. So the good news, it's not number 1. But in terms of scammers, Thailand is number 6. And Thailand has over $16.5 billion US dollars scammed every year. It's number 6. Number 1 is India. Okay. And then comes China. And then they start coming down. So we start where we started from. Security is only as secure as the devices you use. And if your mindset is not thinking security, you'll never think security. So I want to come back to a very simple example. In my country, when I go out, I lock my doors. I have CCTV. I have alarms. I don't have any of that on my phone. None. But from my phone, I can check my CCTV at home. That's really good, isn't it? So all I'm saying to you is that it's progressing. Quantum versus classical. Classical is here today. There are elements of that you can use at a domestic level, at a commercial level, and at a defense level. Quantum is coming, okay? It's like, it might be more than a decade away before it becomes the Big Bang, if we say. But commercially available, where every man and child will have this pervasive technology, is more than a lifetime away from me. 15, 20 years. But the big computers could be here within 10 years. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope it's given you a chance to reflect on where you are in your journey, where your company is, where you are with your home, what information your children give away over the internet. Just be careful. Think about the worst, and then think about reality, because they're very close. Thank you.